going on, everybody? It's Rowaidra coming at you with a brand new video, and if you couldn't tell, we're doing something a little bit different today. Now, this clearly isn't Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's not Pokemon, it's not even Alestrals. This is UniVersus. For those of you that are already familiar with UniVersus and you're just here for the deck profile, feel free to skip to this timestamp down below in order to just get straight to the point. I do want to give a bit of an explanation though for the fans of my channel who are just now experiencing this game for the first time. UniVersus, formerly known as the Universal Fighting System, is one of those games where they take a bunch of different existing franchises and kind of pit them against each other so that you can kind of make up your own experiences between the franchises going at it. As of right now, it's mostly anime franchises that are being included, similar to like Weiss Schwarz, for example. However, in the past, they've had things such as Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat before they revamped the game. I don't know how long ago, honestly. It might have been like 2017 or something. But also, they do currently have things like Godzilla, for example, that isn't just really anime. The main one, though, is My Hero Academia, as you can see here. It's the one they focused on for a good while until they started introducing more back into the game. I believe we have Critical Role, Cowboy Bebop, Yu Yu Hakusho, Godzilla just came out, and we also have Attack on Titan coming soon, alongside, of course, My Hero Academia. And I really like this card game. I really like all the mechanics that come with it. I'm not going to do a breakdown of the rules or anything like that. You'll just kind of have to guess, I suppose, throughout the video if you aren't familiar with the game already. And I am currently playing a Himiko Toga 3 deck. Now, the reason I'm playing Toga 3 is because A, I really like Toga as a character. Anyone that follows me on Twitter will obviously know that. Also, it was the very first structure deck I got for the game that actually introduced me to the game because I thought it was pretty interesting. And also, I genuinely think Toga 3 is actually really good. It's a super solid character that doesn't really require too much combo thought process. It's kind of just like look at your hand and be like, okay, how should I sequence my attacks, you know? And I know I am talking about this in like a quote-unquote competitive sense, but really my only meta is literally Godzilla. My friend plays Godzilla because he got the structure deck, and we've had like a couple of additions to his deck. We are ordering some stuff, we're proxying some things. You'll see like 2 proxies in here for Deception Dagger because I am poor, but that's probably why you won't see too many like super like specific staples such as struggling with studies. I have that bumped to the side. Same with things like gory stab. I actually replaced as well. So this probably isn't like the most accurate thing to go off of when it comes to like competitive play, but I just really wanted to show off the list that I've been using because I really love this game and I really love this deck. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I already kind of discussed Toga a little bit, but I suppose I'll discuss a little bit more. I really love her set of abilities. It's super simplistic. You get to commit or make your opponent commit a foundation when you swing with a weapon attack, and it is a response, so you get to use it immediately, and then you can combo that with stuns as well to get potentially up to 4 in a row, like right off the bat before your opponent can do much, which I really like in this deck. Also, the stat boost is really cool for the first attack, especially in combination with things like Trolling Needle that's always treated as the first attack, and I do like being able to add anything from the discard to the momentum, because that includes things like foundations that you might want to add back off your ambush thrust, so you can kind of combo with that if you're not just going for raw damage. I also want to give an apology to anyone that is familiar with UniVersus that's just here for the profile, because I have no idea how to format these, so I'm just going to go from biggest foundations to smallest. Starting off, we have our 3 drops, just 2 of them. We have 2 Abandoning All Inhibitions and 2 Excited for Blood. Both of these are really solid cards, and you don't really need any other 3-drop foundations because you'd rather kind of save up your checks, especially because you have really low checks in this deck. You are playing a 1 check in here, which is pretty bad at times. It can kind of just ruin a game for you, but it's also like such a good card, so it's kind of worth it. I should have mentioned if I haven't already, though, this is a death build for Toga 3, so we are playing the Rushing Stab is what I'm referring to. But these are super solid cards. You don't really need anything other than that. Abandoning All Inhibitions helps you combo a lot of stuff with your lower checks because it doesn't count towards progressive difficulty, or makes your first attack not count towards it. And then Excited for Blood, I really like being able to draw extra cards. It can be extra attacks or extra foundations, and then gaining the 4 health back along with Blood Transfer allowing you to gain health can potentially help you survive a whole extra attack. Onto our 2 drops, we have 4 copies of Strange Friendship, mostly just here for the 6 check. We are also playing League Interview, so we have a total of like 6 checks in the deck, which is really good. It makes it a lot harder to actually fail your checks. But the on-field effect is also really good. I do like getting that extra damage. It can really juice up something like a Gouging Needle, or even a Piercing Needle, for example, after you played a few attacks, because Piercing Needle can give itself that EX3 speed. We also have 3 deft maneuvers, really great way of adding additional speed and damage to your stuff. Also triggers learning to harden, which, speaking of, 2 copies of learning to harden. I love that this card can be used both offensively and defensively, and also if it does die either by your own stuff or your opponent's, getting that draw card could potentially save your life or help you kill your opponent. We've also got 2 copies of Stalking Her Prey. So for the longest time, I was really only using the response, where if your opponent increases the speed of their attack, you can reduce it by 3 and then flip it. But I have occasionally used the Toga Enhance to flip and remove a momentum to replace it with one from your discard. It's really good in combination with things like Rushing Stab to get that draw 2, or I guess the other effect of Rushing Stab, which I've literally never used. Things like Blood Transfer to help keep you alive or trigger other certain things. You can even use it to stack multiple piercing needles in order to do more damage to your opponent off of one attack, which is really cool. I did mention we are playing 2 copies of League Interview. I really like this card. This is one of the cards that I actually used to replace some cards that I found out were actually out of rotation. I was still playing some stuff from My Hero 1, which I found out wasn't legal. But League Interview is actually really good. That first form to mill 2 and then give your next weapon attack check, or I guess your first one, +1, feels super nice because you can just take your things like Deadly Ambush or Deception Dagger and make them so much easier to reliably hit. Also, the basically double commit for a block, essentially, because it gives a +1 check. You can just flip it and then commit it right after to get basically like a +2 total on your block value, which is really good. I really enjoy this card, and I actually kind of wanted to play a third. And then the final 2 check in the deck, we just have a single copy of Latent Skill. Honestly, this was mostly here to just be like a last-second replacement for a rotated card, and I kind of wanted to have the same amount of cards in my deck. Latent Skill is okay, though. You can discard things you'd rather keep in your discard for your momentum plays later, or you can just discard high checks for your blocks in hand to just try and draw into some lower ones. Makes it a lot easier. Otherwise, it's kind of like an indifferent card. For our 1-drops, we have 4 copies of Red Right's the coolest, more like this card is the coolest. But no, I really do like it. Being able to use it while committed to give +2 damage to an attack is pretty cool, just by flipping it. And so you can kind of just get a lot of value out of it, especially in combination with things like Ambush Thrust or Deft Maneuvers. You can commit it for a check, flip it for more damage, and then use those to get even more damage by destroying it now that it's basically lived out its usefulness. We've also got 3 copies of Dangerous Combatant. Being able to draw extra cards is always nice, especially because you will be committing a lot of your opponent's foundations, or they will be committing a lot of their own when you are trying to damage them, and they need to go for a block. One of my favorite cards in the entire deck that I only recently learned about and ordered it is a Refreshing Slice. Oh, I love this card. So I end up having a lot of situations where I'm sitting with a bunch of momentum just sitting there in my momentum, and outside of like Gouging and Piercing Needle, which don't come up like all too often, is like it's just kind of sitting there, right, all that momentum. And a Refreshing Slice is such a good card at actually making a lot of use out of that momentum. As many times as you want per turn, you get to just discard a momentum to ready it and then force your opponent to commit, which not only makes it easier to block, but makes it harder for your opponent to actually attack you reliably without failing their checks, and that makes it even harder for them to actually block your attacks as well. And there's kind of just like no real downside to this card other than the fact that it's a 4 instead of like a 5 or something. In that case, I think it could be kind of broken, but I think that this is genuinely such an insane card if you're playing the death symbol. And then finally, we're playing 3 copies of Blood Bank because reducing the difficulty of your checks is really good. It just does suck that it's another 1/4 in the deck instead of like a 1/5 or something, but it's not the end of the world. Wrapping up the foundations with these 0-drops, we have 3 Surviving the Final, not too much to say there, very standard death staple. 3 Space Terror to finally break the My Hero immersion. Yeah, I had to use this to replace Tight-Lipped because I realized it was rotated, and I was like, I guess I'll finally get out of the pure My Hero list. I'll just add a Godzilla card in, and this basically does almost the exact same thing as Tight-Lipped, just with a higher block modifier. 3 copies of Foresight. I have a love-hate relationship with this card because on one hand, it's kind of useless when it's sitting on board because I never use that enhance ever. It's just like a fodder on the board for like checks and stuff after I use it. But I do like being able to see the top card of my deck because it can help me decide so many different things. Like, A, is the next card that I play going to go through? B, am I going to hit the Rushing Stab off the top and want to blow my brains out? C, is it worth it to waste a card so that the next card that I do want to play, such as a block on the opponent's turn, or if my opponent is going to force me to make a check, maybe I'm going to reveal an attack off this, and I'd rather waste a card in my hand to get rid of that off the top of my deck to try and see something higher. So it is pretty useful, especially when you are trying to set up your initial board. And finally, 2 Transformation Materials, just for a little bit of extra damage in case you're already popping off on your opponent. That's it for the foundations. Moving on to the attacks, we have 2 copies of Deadly Ambush. This is the secret rare from the structure deck, which is really cool. And despite the very high play cost, it is actually such a good card. It's a good 1 blocker mid, has 6 low speed and 5 damage, is going to go up to 9/7 when you enhance it with Toga, because this is most likely going to be your very first attack because of its high cost. You get to destroy a committed rival foundation, which is always going to be live due to Toga, and also if it deals damage, you get to gain 2 and your rival loses 2, which is super good at getting you back into the HP gain. Turns on things such as your Excited for Blood, for example, in case you were already too low to use it, now you can. Also can just deal extra damage without having a restriction. This can actually reduce your rival low 1 HP, which isn't super common for a lot of Toga cards. Very, very good card to open with on your turn. Similarly, we also have 2 Deception Dagger. As I mentioned, this is proxy, that's why you probably can't read like a single thing. But being able to have stun 2, give your other attack stun 2 while it's in your momentum, and get rid of things from your opponent's discard, which is really good against, like, I don't know, for Hawks, for example, because they add things back from the discard. And increasing the speed simultaneously is super, super good. 5 damage also, of course, is really good. If you start off with this, it's a bare minimum going to be a 5/7, plus whatever speed you get off of its effect, so potentially up to like an 8/7. Super, super cool. And then for the final one, 5 and above, we have 2 copies of Sudden Stab. I actually do really like this card. It does suck that it kind of makes you miss out on certain other things. Like, if you open this plus Rushing Stab, most of the time you'd rather have the Rushing Stab stun 3 go off first, but Sudden Stab is also really good to start with, A, because of its high cost, B, because it gets to draw a card if it's the first attack, and C, because, well, actually just a lot of different reasons, right? It's got, like, high stats as well. It's a 5/5 mid. And then also, if it's blocked, period, your next check to play a weapon attack is +1. So I suppose it is better typically to start with the Sudden Stab, because you do get the ability to get that draw 1. You also force your opponent to probably take the damage because they don't want your next check to get +1. Would be really good in combination with something like Deadly Ambush or Rushing Stab. I do really like the card. It just sucks when, like, you draw it mid-combo, right? And, like, you've already attacked a couple times, and now it's kind of dead in your hand. And onto the 4 drops. The only ones we play more than 2 of is 4 Deadly Ambush and 4 Ambush Thrust, and then 4 Twirling Needle. Both of these cards are very, very good. Ambush Thrust can get you back important things from your momentum that you can then use again. Things such as your Rushing Stab, things such as your Blood Transfer, Piercing Needle even, which is really good at pushing for game. And then Twirling Needle gives things extra speed, stacks with Toga enhanced multiple times. It gives basically just like a guaranteed 6/6. And especially these in combination with each other is pretty good, because you can go like 1 attack to put Twirling Needle from your discard into your momentum, Ambush Thrust, add it back, and then use this on top of that. So you can get a lot of damage in pretty easily off of this. We also have 2 copies of Blood Transfer, really good at triggering things such as your Excited for Blood, such as your Blood Bank, anything that would trigger like when your opponent or after your opponent has taken damage. You can use this to get it in earlier, helps keep you alive a little bit, and potentially can get you some extra momentum. Like, if you use this as your very first attack and juice it up for like a lot of damage, your opponent might actually want to block it, which can just easily give you some extra momentum by adding the top card to your deck face up, which is really good in combination with things like Rushing Stab or anything else that would have an ability in the momentum. We also have 2 copies of Piercing Needle. This actually replaced Gory Stab, because Gory Stab really did not come up too much in the Godzilla matchup. It probably come up in like a lot of other matchups, of course, but I really did not want to lose extra life when Godzilla can already pump out so much damage. Just really did not feel super good. But Piercing Needle is pretty cool. It can help you get like an additional 2 damage in, especially in your first attack when your opponent's very unlikely to block it or be able to block it, especially in combination with like Deadly Ambush, right? Like, you can do 7 off the Deadly Ambush with the Toga enhance, plus the 2 from its own enhance, plus 2 more from Piercing Needle. It can end up comboing pretty good. Also, having that EX3 is pretty cool, and I always forget it has Deadlock Stun 3 as well, which is also good. With just its regular enhance, I mean the +2 speed, -2 damage, it's not like a lot of damage is going to be put out, but it's going to be almost a guaranteed hit on your opponent, which can make it a lot easier to get things in your momentum that you really want, such as your Rushing Stabs. This is like the black sheep of the deck. It's either the best card in the deck, or it really just makes you want to cry and never play this game again, because it is a 4-drop attack with stun 3, and in the momentum lets you either draw 2 cards, or like, seal rival foundations if your opponent's lost health in the combat phase. It doesn't really matter too much. It's mostly just drawing 2 cards on a 4 mid 5, 2 mid block. It's like a super good card. bogged down by the fact that the check value is a 1. This completely makes the card a lot worse, but I still think it is so strong when you can actually pull it off, because literally starting with this as your very first attack with Toga allows you to basically stun 4 foundations, which probably is almost all of their foundations after you like go first, for example, so that is kind of massive. I really like the card, except for when I mill it for a check, and then I really just want to cry. And then finally, we have 21 attacks in the deck instead of like the typical 20, quote-unquote. I am playing 1 copy of Gouging Needle. It doesn't come out all the time, and I was playing 2, but I did drop it down to 1 because it was pretty niche. But being able to get so much damage in on the Gouging Needle at once can kind of just become the end of the opponent in certain cases. For example, they use all of their other resources to block your first attacks, but then you just use a Gouging Needle like super juiced up with like 3+ momentum to get it to like 13+ attack, and then just doing a massive punch on your opponent, especially with its decently solid speed off the bat, a 5 low. It is really good when you can pull it off, and it can just kind of help you go for the throw. Otherwise, it is a pretty good 0 high blocker. And that's going to do it for my Toga deck profile for UniVersus. For the, I guess, girl power format is currently what we're still in, even though it doesn't really matter too much because Godzilla is literally my only opponent anyway. I do really like this deck. It is so much fun, and this game is so cool, and I really wish more people tried it out. So if you aren't familiar with the game, but you did show up to like check this video out, then please be sure to give UniVersus a check out. Admittedly, it doesn't have its own like actual simulator online, but there are things such as Card Game Simulator and Tabletop Simulator on Steam, the former of which being free completely as long as you add your own stuff in. You can absolutely experience the game that way. And also some of the product, like the Toga structure deck, actually isn't too expensive. It's like $12, $11, something like that, which is pretty cool. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked it, please leave a like, as I'll split this video and the channel into the YouTube recommended. And if you like this content, or like it, like some more UniVersus content potentially. Might get my friend's Godzilla list when it's completed. It might get a few games in, something like that. Then perhaps consider subscribing and turning on notifications, because support your channel or anything else, and it's absolutely free. Also, if you want to support me directly, you can get some awesome TCG merchandise in the process. Check out Tapio cards, the link down below. Use code AURORA5 for 5% off your purchase at checkout, and support me financially. And to be sure to check out the Patreon in the description as well. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.